Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to Tag Team, Pokemon Trading Card Games Premier Podcasting Duo. My name is Riley Holbert, joined, as always, by one of my good friends, this time, Andrew Mahone. Andrew,
Yes,
welcome back from Brazil. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Riley. Thank you for asking. I had the most wonderful trip in Brazil. The people were amazing, and I got to meet so many awesome folks. I mean, I couldn't believe how many people there actually knew what Tricky Gym was and watched Tricky Gym and like
I
liked it.
told you, man. I told you before you went. You got shooters down there.
I had no idea, dude. I had no
It's
idea.
serious.
It was. I had no idea. So shout out to all my homies from Brazil. It was awesome, and I loved getting to meet you. That was fantastic. I really had no perspective. Having never been to South America before, I don't speak a lick of Portuguese. So it was really heartwarming getting to meet so many people who were into Tricky Gym. So that was phenomenal. And then, I got to go to the beach. I got to explore some of Sao Paulo, and I got to play in the event. It was a great time.
I gotta ask, what was your number one highlight moment from visiting Sao Paulo?
Visiting Sao Paulo. I mean, I went to the beach. The beach is not in Sao Paulo. The beach was probably my favorite thing that I did.
Yeah.
But my favorite part of Sao Paulo was going to the MASP Museum. It's an art museum in downtown Sao Paulo, which was really beautiful. And I was palling around with my buddy Joe, who is a Full Grip Games local, who I went on the trip with, and Joe is just a super cool dude. We had a really fun time, and it was awesome how you go into an experience like that as maybe like acquaintances. We were friends, but then you come out of a trip like that, and it's like, now Joe's my good friend, right?
Totally, yeah.
We have these deeper experiences now, and at the art museum, I got to go full on art nerd, on him and just be a geek. And I was chatting. I'm like, all right, this is what this piece. I was like, Joe, what do you think this piece stands for, Ray? What do you think? What kind of symbolism is going on? And I was like going full art history on him. It was sick. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really do appreciate that when you visit like new countries that you have a tendency, I've noticed, to visit the art museums, and I like that personally. Like, I like getting to experience the culture of the place through art.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, art's like the universal language, right? So I love that. And you get to learn a lot about culture and perspectives and things like that through art. And that's one of the things that it's best at doing. So definitely loved my experience at the MOSP.
That's awesome, man. I'm so glad you got to have that experience. It's kind of spur of the moment to choose to go, and it seems like it was a very worthwhile trip. I'm kind of jealous, to be honest. I wish I had more than one vacation day to use for the entire rest of the year.
That is a perk of being a streamer guy, is that I guess I kind of set my own schedule. So that's nice. They feel like, it's funny, they're tax write-offs, they're kind of like my business conferences, right? It's like, oh, well, I got a business conference in Brazil this week. Yeah, that's fine. It's just part of the gig. I get to go and meet all these awesome people and experience these new places, and it's all part of the I guess it's part of the content machine. I'm making a vlog right now on my trip, and this one's going to be really special. I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that one as well when it comes out, and showing it off to my friends who have enjoyed your Japan vlog.
Yeah, and it's crazy now because the Japan vlog was a very, it had its own kind of tempo and vibe and personality. It was very beautiful and kind of like just a sentimental trip. But the Brazil trip is decidedly different. I mean, we went to the beach, and it is like very kind of like, poppy and loud and fast paced, and that is going to be. It's going to be a lot of fun to edit up and to see just the contrast between the different places, and I think it's going to be really cool.
Yay, that's so exciting. And that's all to say, like, this is all centered around, your business conference of the Latin America International Championship, one of the biggest tournaments of the year. one of the most
Yep.
prestigious tournaments of the year. And I'm so excited to sort of dig into it and talk about it. JW and I last week, we recorded like a mid-tournament overview. We talked about what was going on through day one. We gave our predictions for day two. I think it'll be fun to both revisit those and then also just talk about, what actually happened on the ground. Andrew, of course, you played while you were there. Do you want to briefly walk through your personal experiences at the Latin America International Championship?
Yes, I would love to. So I did some testing. I did quite a bit of testing leading up to the trip. And I did a lot of testing with Joe, who I said, again, is Full Grip Games local here in Akron. His girlfriend works here at the shop, Bella, and, they're good friends. So I did some testing with Joe, who's been playing for about 2 years, so a little bit newer, but pretty good at the game. I mean, he's really coming along. He's kind of in that stage where he's really excited. He's really hyped and trying to get like his first really good finish. He's day 2'd like one regional before. The potential's there. He's just, he's constantly putting in the work to try and get to that next level. So he was really liking Charizard, and we were looking at the Heavenly Kings winning Charizard list, with the Toad Scroll tech, trying to judge, how popular or powerful Baxcalibur would be. Ultimately, Joe decided that we didn't need to play the Toad Scroll and decided instead to play a Panic Mask to help tech for Gardevoir, which he decided would be more popular. I was rooming with Joe and trainer Chip Richie, and I had reached out to Chip because Joe didn't get into the initial flight or in the initial registration for LAIC. So I was like, holy smokes, I was planning on traveling with Joe. Joe didn't get in. I gotta make a backup plan. So I reached out to Chip, and Chip's like, yeah, I think we could fit you in. And Chip is staying with Azul and Grant Manley and Caleb Gademer. And so then Joe did get in, and I was like, well, do you have room for one more? And they were like, yeah, okay, well, we'll just get another room. So we had this big group of me, Joe, Chip, Grant Manley, Azul, and Caleb. And so we're all testing leading up to the event. Azul's group with Caleb, they're really liking Charizard and Baxcalibur. I'm really liking Gardevoir, and Joe's really liking Charizard. They end up going with Baxcalibur. Joe plays Charizard. I play Gardevoir. And I had a pretty okay experience. I'd say I felt pretty strong out the gates. I played against a Charizard round 1, and I had done a ton of testing against Charizard because that's what Joe was playing, and me and Joe were just running games. So I beat Charizard round 1. I played a Gardevoir round 2, which I was able to win. I think both of those sets were 1-0, 35-minute game ones, and then
Classic.
I'm and this is just what I'm probably going to be doing a lot of. I just, if my opponent doesn't scoop, that's just how it's going to go. If you're going to lose a 35-minute game 1, you're going to, what are you expecting to do? So then round 3, I play against a Gardevoir, and I just barely tie. My opponent wins at the end of turns in game 2. And then things really start going off the tracks in round 4. I play against an Iron Valiant Urshifu deck.
Ugh.
This player did not end up doing well at the event, and I don't even think that it was a good call for the event. I was pretty upset, because I was like, how are you 2-0-1 with this Iron Valiant Urshifu deck? You're just trying to donk people. There's a ton of Guardy here. If I just set up at all, I just stomp you. So anyways, I start my 160 hit point Ralts and a 60 hit point Celebration Mew. I get donked. So then I'm like, okay. And I didn't find any Battle VIP pass, of course. So then I roll up again, and I'm like, okay, round 2 or game 2, I'm going to just find a Battle VIP pass. This is all going to be fine. All I have to do is establish something, and I'm good. And sure enough, I started 2 Pokemon. My opponent Yoga Looped and knocked the other out. And it was just a back-to-back donk. And after that, I was like, I was feeling pretty bad about everything after that. I was frustrated to go from 2-0-1 to 2-1-1, and I'm like, okay, well now with Guardy too, you're like, okay, well, no more losing. I need to just I just need to win all these next games. Beat a Baxcalibur. And then unfortunately lost to a Gardevoir. I was really missing the third rare candy. My opponent got set up and attacked first in both of our games, and that really allowed them to be able to take command of the game and limit the amount of Curlies in play since they were attacking first. And that momentum, in a lot of ways, can just carry you through, because if you're playing from behind, you're just hoping your opponent whiffs something eventually, and if they don't, then they'll just win. So my opponent was able to attack first in both games, and that was no good. Then I beat a Lost Zone Giratina. I lost to a Lost Zone Radiant Charizard deck that played Pokemon Go Articuno, and that was really terrible for me because I cut the Jirachi from the list the night before the event. So Sableye was able to spread damage onto my bench. They played the Devolver TM as well. And my game plan was then to use Cresselia to Moonglow reverse damage off my board and take knockouts. But with Cramorant just able to knock out Cresselia, it was horrible. And the fact that I couldn't get a quick attack going ever. I just wasn't drawing very hot, but also the third rare candy might have helped me to get faster attacks, which would have helped in those, situations against more aggressive decks like Lost Zone. So at that point, I'm feeling pretty dejected. I'm 4-3-1, and I need to win my last round to make top 256 in order to get 80 championship points, which would be still a fine turnout. And sure enough, my final round, I get a no-show. Let's go. Which is exactly what I needed, because I was sick of playing this deck. I'm never, ever, ever, ever putting a rare candy in any tournament deck ever again.
I'm holding you to that.
Thank you. And please do. Just look at the finals, man. Miraidon versus Entei Valiant. Rare candy is a trap. You won't catch me playing it again. No shot, bro. I felt like I was at the whim of finding those things, and giving your opponent a 3-turn head start in games is just unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah. And let's maybe transition then to talking about the broader landscape of the tournament. So Gardevoir was the most popular deck in day 1 and day 2. It was overwhelmingly so the most popular deck. A lot of people seem to have reached that same conclusion, that Gardevoir is really strong. I do want to call out, there were 3 Gardevoirs in top 8. So not only was it most popular, it did carry that momentum through.
Yeah.
And the 3 lists up there did look pretty similar to the list that you were playing in the end. So even down to the 2 rare candies. So, I know you had your bad beats, but that's just sometimes the way the tournament goes.
Frankly, the donk that one round, if that's a win, I'm in day 2. I'm in day 2, right? So it's it's just small little things can happen like that can make or break the tournaments. And I didn't feel the call was fine, I think, right?
It was fine. Totally. And so Gardevoir obviously a really strong play for the event. JW and I both predicted that 3 Gardevoir would make top 8, and
no
we were both
way.
Right. 3 Gardevoir did make top 8. Looking outside of the finalists with Miraidon and Entei Valiant, we also had a Giratina Lost Zone box, a Lost Box Charizard, which was my personal favorite deck heading into the event, and a Snorlax Stall. One of them made it through. So compared to JW and I's prediction, we were really into Chen Pao. We thought Chen Pao would make a bigger showing in that top 8 than it ended up doing. Both of us predicted 2, and both of us were very wrong because there were 0. So
only 1 in top 32.
And 1 in top 16 as well, to be fair.
Well, the same one. It was just, there was just that one. Ian Robb
correct.
Made top 16, but then I'm saying in top 32 because there were none between 16 and 32. And Ian Robb also tweeted that he would never play that deck again.
Yeah, and so to be honest, I've never been a fan of Chen Pao. I don't think Iron Hands really fixed the problems that Chen Pao had. I've said as much on the cast many times. Iron Hands,
it being
makes
a pile.
makes the whole Radiant Greninja situation. It's a simpler version of doing that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the landscape of the game in a way. You know what I'm saying? You still have all the same problems that you have pre Iron Hands, and Iron Hands just makes that route easier. It's not like you didn't have that route before, even with taking multiple prizes in a turn. So to be honest, not surprised to see Chen Pao fall off, but I did look at it with maybe a more hopeful lens heading into the tournament.
I agree. I was ready to concede that Chen Pao might just be the best Iron Hands deck. And that is the conclusion that Azul and Caleb and Grant Manley and Chip came to in their testing. And
Yeah.
it was cool getting to kind of watch them go through it. And they ended up settling on Chen Pao Baxcalibur. You've got a group of some of the best players in the world bringing this deck to the event. Azul doesn't make day 2, ends up dropping with a few losses. And then Caleb, Grant, and Jishen, actually, Jishen was staying with them as well. They all made top 64 with Chen Pao Baxcalibur. But those are like, I mean, we're talking about the best finishing Baxcalibur decks. And you guys predicted 2 in top 8. I certainly thought there'd be 2 in top 8. And then we've got 1 in top 16, 0 in top 32, and then 3 of the best players in the world, top 64. Granted, top 64. Top 64 gives $2,000 now, man. $2,000 for top 64 at IC. Man.
Yeah, I got to go to more ICs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Chen Pao, definitely a loser of this event. And when we think of Iron Hands now, it seems like Miraidon is the deck that it feels like the narrative around Iron Hands has flip-flopped over time, right? Like initially people are like, oh, of course it's going to go in Miraidon. You can Miraidon for it. That's awesome. And then it became, no, it's too hard to power up in Miraidon. It's going to go in Chen Pao. It's going to go in Lugia with Earthen Vessel.
Yeah.
And then Miraidon wins, I believe, seniors and masters at LAIC. Iron Valiant Entei also won, I believe, juniors. so those 2 decks completely swept LAIC, which is absolutely insane, I gotta say.
What does it say, Riley? What does it say? Yes, we have Miraidon winning, won a regionals, now has won in international championships. Entei, a deck that a lot of people kind of wrote off as being maybe just like a speedy beat stick that is, it carries some bad matchups. What do we have to, what does this mean? These 2 big basic decks rising to the top?
Yeah, I think in general, like, it harkens back to something that you and I have personally thought for a long time, and that's just big basic strategies are reliable. Above all else, they're going to be reliable, and they're going to beat down on strategies that aren't as reliable. And, when you look at the makeup of the top 8, Gardevoir, it can be taken advantage of by these big basic decks, especially with the addition of Iron Hands. Miraidon used to struggle in that matchup, but now it's able to take some quicker knockouts, and that 1 prize differential could be the game.
100%.
And if you attack with it twice, you just win. So you're just like putting that on the table. And then Entei Valiant really takes advantage of those evolution decks much more directly with the Iron Valiant pings and the Yoga Loop. So it kind of tracks that these decks would perform well. Over the course of the entire tournament, Gardevoir did super well. But in the makeup of this top 8, all it takes is 1 stumble point for those decks to really beat through that matchup and carry all the way. Same thing goes for Lost Box, right? Like, it's so easy for Lost Box to just have 1 stumble point, and with an Iron Hands or with a Yoga Loop, that stumble point is like unacceptable in that game of margins. So that's why I think ultimately, like, the big basic decks succeeded is they're just reliable and can take advantage of the other decks not being as reliable in the same capacity. I want to talk about Iron Valiant first because JW and I did trash talk Iron Valiant leading into day 2 of LAIC.
Too. I also did. I'm guilty of that. Yeah, I called it not a serious meta threat. Yeah.
And I'll admit that I was wrong. I'll also say I hadn't really given the Entei version as much time of day as maybe I should have. A lot of my opinion was based on the Urshifu variant, which I stand by. I think that deck's trash.
Me too. That deck is total trash, yes.
I think if you're playing Urshifu, just play the whole Rapid Strike deal. Like, why are you playing this Iron Valiant thing? It's just silly.
Yeah, the
I think
Entei is
Entei,
just more powerful. Yeah.
yeah, it's just more powerful and it synergizes better.
Yeah.
The Entei I actually do think has a little bit better of a synergy with Iron Valiant than the Urshifu does, because you can take those bigger knockouts with Entei, through the assistance of Iron Valiant pings. It's a little quicker out of the gates, and so you, in the whole theme of Iron Valiant is to be kind of quick and place damage quickly and take advantage of your opponent. Urshifu has to evolve, so implicitly doesn't fit in that same paradigm. And I think the fleet-footed actually makes a huge difference in that deck. That deck is so clunky. You're playing like so many switch cards.
Yeah.
You need to be able to like actually hit stuff over the course of the game, and that incremental advantage accrued by 1 to 2 fleet-footed a turn does make a big difference. And that's something that Urshifu again cannot do. So I definitely like underestimated the Entei variant. I think it's pretty good, and I pulled up the play limitless stats on the Entei variant just to get a sense of its landscape in the metagame. It's actually got a lot of really solid matchups, and I think even in the finals, that matchup is very close, and potentially even favored for Entei if they're hitting their stuff consistently.
Yeah.
We saw that Noah Sawyer bricked a little bit, which is the weakness I would say of the deck, but really I think the bad matchup for the Entei variant are some decks that aren't super popular right now. Fusion Mew, Nightmare Mode matchup. You're really not wanting to see that. Some of the more traditional like single strike Lugia, Nightmare Mode matchup. You're really not trying to see that. But that wasn't what made up the majority of LAIC, and so you're able to take advantage of the decks that you do like to see, the Gardevoirs, the Charizards, the Lost Zone boxes, the things that you can take advantage of with the pings. So props to Noah for kind of like seeing through the fog and making that call. He's been playing for a long time, and this is his spikiest finish, I would say, yet. So very cool to see.
Yes, and I played against Noah at Worlds, actually, in day 1, I believe, and he was playing the Rapid Strike Inteleon VMAX, Urshifu VMAX deck. So to see that kind of like the love of the spread strategy kind of carry through to a very successful finish was definitely neat, and I'm sure that there was some of those skills that he had accrued playing the Inteleon deck kind of carry over to Iron Valiant with Yoga Loop playing a part.
And definitely, I think the Entei deck is here to stay. Just even glancing over in the world of Twitter, there are so many people who have picked up this deck and are taking it to their local, to their league challenge, all this sort of stuff. This deck is going to be around, and you have to factor it in a way, and you have to respect it in a way maybe you didn't have to going into LAIC. It is super popular now. People love playing this kind of deck. You're going to see it a lot at your tournaments.
Yes, it's getting the whole Miraidon treatment right now. It is. Entei is here. I've got some people in my Twitch chat who have been, and you know who you are, Icky. All right, there are people who have been just so excited for Entei to finally be good. They've been, trying to play Entei the entire time. The one legendary beast that was not as good as the others, right? And they've been, and now there's like a good Entei deck, and people are woo, just absolutely loving it. And it's a kind of strategy that I think will draw a lot of players in. The fact that you can overrun decks like Gardevoir and Lost Box, which are really grindy, like big brain thinker decks, right? The fact that you could just like overrun and pummel those decks with brute force is going to be attractive to a lot of players, I think. Because Guardy and Lost Box are the kind of decks that I think many players consider to be the most annoying decks to play against, right? For one reason or another. They have a lot of game actions. They take a long time for your opponent to complete their turns. And to be able to just like kind of spank those decks and run them off the board, I think is probably extremely satisfying and something that a lot of players are going to be excited to do.
Yeah, and also just like the deck is fun, right? You get to switch around and place damage, like a lot of cool, interesting actions every turn. So I can see why people like it. And I think it is, worth specifically calling out. It is really cool and interesting to me that we've had the 3 legendary beasts. they're all effectively the same card with some minor variations in HP
Right.
and retreat cost. Um, they all have different mechanisms to power them up and play them, but all three of them have seen very significant meta success over the course of their lifetime without feeling like oppressive cards on their own. And I think that's just really sick, to be honest. I think that's really cool. And I kind of like that they're all mirror images of each other. It makes it fun to see the different ways they can be successful.
Yeah. Yes, it is cool. I mean, Entei coming in here at the end and making its presence felt. Same with Magma Basin. I mean, Magma Basin's just a card that it's a good card. How could it not
totally.
be good?
A stadium that accelerates energy is nuts.
I know. And it's like, you're as a longtime Pokemon player, you're looking at a card like Magma Basin, like, how is this card not good, right? It's just so insane. Like, imagine if Miraidon had access to that stadium. Like,
oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, right? Like, yeah, we'd be playing 4 of that thing in our Miraidon decks, easy peasy.
Easily, yeah.
You wouldn't need to play Flaffy at all.
Yeah, we don't need to evolve anything.
Yeah, we don't need to evolve anything, bro. Right. So to see that card see some play and get some love is definitely cool as well. I was certainly very surprised to see Entei Valiant rise to the top tables. There weren't many, and I think like you look at the results. It's Noah. And then there was Magnus Peterson got top 64, and then one player got top 128. So that's 3, right?
Yeah.
So Noah, very good player, been playing for a long time, being able to really capitalize on some strong matchups. And, when you look at the fact that 20%, it was like 24% of the day 2 field was Gardevoir.
Yep.
And being able to just kind of farm that matchup must have really paid off for Noah at this event. Were you expecting 20% Gardevoir meta share? That's something I was blown away, and I would not have chose to play Gardevoir if I knew it was going to be dang near a quarter of the field.
I did expect Gardevoir to be the most popular deck, but I didn't expect it to be at that level of the most popular deck, Because you can be the most popular deck and be cruising at like 15%, and the next deck down is 14%. And that's kind of what I was expecting for Gardevoir. But day 1 and day 2 completely blew everything else out of the water in terms of meta share. I was really not expecting that. I thought people were more excited about some of the new archetypes than they ended up actually being in practice. I'm not really sure how exactly that ended up that way. Gardevoir, of course, is super strong, and it shows with its results, but I would not have nailed down the quarter of the meta being Gardevoir.
Yeah, that really caught me off guard for sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I would have expected like more of a showing from Lost Box personally. I would have expected Chen Pao to be more popular than it was. And honestly, I expected Roaring Moon to be more popular than it was, but that also might have been like a card availability thing, maybe. Like people just don't have the deck yet, since it's so soon after the set dropped.
No shot, dude. That deck just stinks.
Yeah, but I expect it to be popular. It's a different concept, right?
I guess so, but like I don't know. After playing it, you have if it's popular, and then you get your hands on it, and then you realize that it stinks, you're probably gonna put it down. So I think that
Fair.
the card is popular. People like it, but I think people also kind of correctly identified this that it was not the best call. Now let's talk about that really quick. I mean, Roaring Moon was this kind of existential threat going into the event, and it's one of the reasons why I was not really considering Miraidon, because it felt like Roaring Moon was just the superior big basic deck, but it felt like Roaring Moon didn't have any of the tricks to be able to deal with decks like Gardevoir. And the energy switch Radiant Greninja thing just wasn't really...
That's such a gimmick. That's so fake.
It wasn't enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what it really boils down to is Miraidon already had tricks in that it was just so simple that you could play Disruption. Or, just get out of the gate so easily and so streamlined that you can Iono turn 2 and turn 3. You can judge when you want to. Roaring Moon doesn't have that same flexibility because you have to be playing Professor Sata's every turn, ideally. And even then, like Roaring Moon, I've said this before, but Roaring Moon's second attack is not that good. Like, it's acceptable, but the condition on it, like, there will be games where it hurts you and you can't take the knockout that you need to. And yeah, I just think the deck's just kind of a pile, and that's fine. Like, it's cool, it's streamlined, it's got that turbo dark energy that people love of just like slinging off dark patches and items like crazy, but I just don't think it's all there to really succeed. And Miraidon did get new tools as well with this set, particularly, we're thinking of Iron Hands as a way to accelerate the game state, which frankly, Miraidon did want against decks like Gardevoir and Charizard to have that little bit of extra push. A lot of those games that come down to like you're 1 or 2 prizes short of being able to close out the game before they could take their 3 knockouts on your big basics. And Iron Hands directly contributes to that win con, whereas Roaring Moon effectively fell into the same trap that Miraidon did before, where you're just attacking with 3/2 prizers for like no real efficient trading. We've referenced Miraidon a lot. Let's maybe close out sort of the retrospective look at LAIC by talking about Miraidon, and then we can project ahead as we wrap up for today. So, Miraidon did win LAIC.
We just keep coming back, man.
I know. The Dawn has shown its dominance yet again, winning LAIC. Very narrow finish in the end. That finals was looking tough, but pulled it out. And it's kind of like exactly what you would expect. It's a very straightforward Miraidon list that ended up winning. I think the main differentiator is there's these 2 Path to the Peak. Historically, we've seen 3 or 4 in Path Miraidon builds. But in exchange, they're playing the double turbo energy as well to try and power up the Iron Hands, which is the other new addition into the deck. So I don't hate those changes, to be honest. I think the 2 Path is serviceable for disrupting towards the end of the game, and you don't need to spam the disruption as much against decks like Gardevoir and Charizard when you're taking 2 prizes with Iron Hands, which is ultimately like what you should be trying to do, is attack with Iron Hands as quickly as possible in the early game and then closing out with your other attackers. So, Andrew, I'm curious for your thoughts on Miraidon coming out of LAIC. Like, what do you think of the list that ended up winning? What do you think this means for Miraidon? Do you think it's here to stay as a big basic archetype?
Yeah, Miraidon is just that deck. It really is. I was incredibly impressed with Juho's run. So major congratulations to Juho on a fantastic tournament run. Looking at his run, he played against 3 Iron Valiant decks, lost to 1 in round 10, tied Noah Sawyer in round 15, and then won the finals. That might have been an ID into top 8, yeah, against Noah Sawyer. So did lose 1, and then you said narrowly won 1. So, that's tight. Obviously, 2 big basic decks just duking it out. But looking at Juho's run, undefeated against Gardevoir. That is what stands out to me. Undefeated against Gardevoir. Yes, and not variants. I mean, it's not like, Juho played against 1 Gardevoir. We're saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and beat back-to-back Gardevoirs in top 8 and top 4.
And maybe more. There's a couple unreported decks in his history as well.
Yes. So that is extremely impressive. And what kind of makes me irk about the list is the 2 Path. I'm like, like, how are you going to beat the decks like Gardevoir? But obviously that was not an issue. And I think that some of that has to do with like the new kind of hotness with the Gardevoir decks, was that people were leaning into them being 1 step slower, some of them not even playing Battle VIP Pass, right? And just saying like, I'm just going to Mirage Step. And by kind of just conceding that I'm going to Mirage Step, or I'm only going to get out maybe a couple of Ralts on turn 1, you are really setting the stage for like a speedy Iron Hands to absolutely dominate you, right? And paths do not matter.
Yeah, and I think what's noteworthy about Miraidon as compared to Chen Pao in that situation is the turn-by-turn layout. Especially if Miraidon goes first, they're almost certainly attacking with Iron Hands on their second turn if they go first. And if they're going second, they can still attack with it on their first turn.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is that they can use Iron Hands basically twice. They can hit into a Ralts or a Cresselia or whatever, and then they can also hit into the Mirage Step. And you just kind of win if that
Game's
happens,
over.
right?
Game's over.
You win. Because you just, even if you trade evenly the rest of the game, like they're taking 2 prize knockouts, you're taking 1 prize knockouts, you win before they win. And so the pace of the Gardevoir decks can't really handle Iron Hands coming out of the gates as quickly as Miraidon can do it. Whereas with Chen Pao, they have to take the off turn, right? They have to evolve. And realistically, if they go first, they might not even attack with Iron Hands on their second turn because they need to hit so many pieces. So what you're looking at is Chen Pao isn't putting on that pressure as quickly, which gives you the time that you need to Mirage Step, to evolve, to do whatever. And even with like a slightly adjusted build, it is not easy to get those big Gardevoir knockouts on the second turn of the game. Even if you play like 3 rare candy, 2 reversals, that's like not easy to hit. And you're not going to have a lot of draw power in that situation either, because you're going to need to evolve 2 of your Ralts into Gardevoirs. And so you're not going to have as many Curlias in play. So it makes it even harder to hit those combos. So I think attacking with Iron Hands quickly with Miraidon, to me, is a better strategy than doing it later in the game. And I'll continue to stand by, like, I almost feel like the Radiant Greninja play is better in Chen Pao because you're like removing multiple Pokemon from the board. It's more complicated, but it like actually advances the game in a more effective way. So I think Juho completely saw through what Gardevoir's plan was heading to this tournament and recognized that Iron Hands was the way to take advantage of that if he could attack with it quickly. And we actually, and the same strategy is what ended up winning in seniors as well, right?
Yeah.
We saw, just pulling up the list, Gabriel Fernandez winning with a very similar list. He played 2 double turbos and 2 Iron Hands.
Awesome. Yeah.
Which is sick, but otherwise relatively streamlined. The other major difference is he didn't play Path, which I think is maybe fine, right? Like if your plan is to just go Iron Hands trade and then trade out the rest of the game, you don't need to disrupt them with Path. Path is more of like a Charizard out, if anything, because Charizard can respond to the Iron Hands if they evolve.
Part of me feels like this was the perfect tournament for Miraidon to win with a 20% Guardy meta share, with decks trending a step slower by not playing Battle VIP Pass. And yes, I agree. Juho kind of just was able to see that and perfectly take advantage of it. I was talking to Chip and Azul and Grant and Caleb, leading up to the event, and they were saying that Baxcalibur Iron Hands about 50% of the time is capable of getting a turn 2 Iron Hands. That's 50% of the time, right? So, I mean, with Miraidon, I have to imagine that you're able to get a turn 2 Iron Hands more than 50% of the time.
And you have a turn 1 more than 0% of the time.
Yes. So, right, like you're going to get a turn 1 sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And then like your turn 2 is probably closer to 60, 70, right? So you could see how big of a difference that makes. And that makes Miraidon the most threatening Iron Hands deck. And when the meta is a quarter of the field is this like slow deck that's really trying to capitalize on the late game, Iron Hands can just kind of wipe the carpet out from underneath them and say, you're not going to have an opportunity to use that game plan. I'm going to run you off the table. And it makes perfect sense. The 2 decks that made the finals of the tournament, it makes perfect sense, right? The meta was all Guardy. The 2 decks that make the finals are the decks that take advantage of that slow setup, right?
Yep. 100%.
Now, looking at the list, there was only one. I mean, honestly, the list is solid. I like it. Back to one Arvin, baby. Let's go. That was, I played one Arvin in my worlds list. Whatever, dude. It's not that good. It's not that good. I think Arvin's is not good enough to play two. I'm with it. Yep, it's not good enough to play two. Just play one. When you see it, you're not mad.
I kind of like the two in this list because it gets you the Forest Seal Stone for double turbo, but
I'm messing around with Peony now.
I don't like the Peony builds.
One Arvin, one Peony, bro.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm trying the because it's like it gives you the second. You could just get two generators if you want. You could still play it like an Arvin. You could get a generator and the Forest Seal Stone. You fill your hand back up with Mew. You're chilling.
Fill your hand is maybe an extreme. You draw a couple of cards.
But the one thing about this list that I'm not the biggest fan of, I do think the Zeraora is interesting. Was obviously a brilliant meta call when 20% of the field is going to be Gardevoir.
It's another way to trade into Guardy, yeah.
Yep. Because like you're going hands and then you're going Zeraora and they just hate their lives, right? So like that's it. Just made sense when 20% of the field. Yeah, go ahead. Really just drive that matchup home, and you could see that paid off for Juho 10 times over. The one thing that I'm not like super duper into is the 3 Iono, because I think that Iono is a supporter that very quickly becomes upside down in this deck, because you are going to go up a couple prizes before your opponent, which means that with 3 Iono in your deck, you're going to be Ionoing yourself to 4 and your opponent to 6. And that is not what you want to do, like almost ever, right? So yes, it's good to have that disruption at the end of the game. I think Iono's perfect count is 2. So
would you play Judge instead in that slot, or
any other supporter, anything else? Just maybe anything else. You could play a Judge there. You could play.
See, part of the reason I like Iono as a counterpoint is in the early game, it's the best push that isn't research, because you're not shuffling your hand in and redrawing the same cards. So if you just need to see a chunk of cards and you don't have a research in your hand, you have an Iono, that's like still acceptable. So that's why I like the heavier Iono, is just because if you're trying to, from my perspective, is you're trying to push to get that early attack and that Iron Hands ideally, but Raikou, Miraidon, whatever you're trying to attack with on that first turn, and Iono helps you do that more than Judge helps you do that, more than some of these other supporters help you do that.
That's fair.
Then like towards the end of the game, it's almost like, who cares? I played through most of my deck anyway, or like I played through it to a acceptable extent. I got Mew in play. Like, who cares?
I know, but giving your opponent 6 cards feels so bad.
Whatever, man. Like, they're garbage anyway. Like, they had a hand anyway. Like, who cares? You don't know if their hand was good or not. Like,
That's true. I do like this list though. I like it. I've been playing with a very similar list on stream, and I think it's very solid. I think Miraidon, these big basic decks are here to stay. They showed that it doesn't matter how sweaty you want to get, how intricate you want your gameplay to be, you can still just get beat by a big basic deck, and you have to respect them. Roaring Moon, totally fraudulent. Its top finish was top 128. It was a 90th place, was the best.
That is a fraudulent finish. Yeah.
That is fraudulent. Yes, Roaring Moon, that is an unserious deck. We're talking like Rayquaza VMAX levels of fraudulent, okay? Like, that's how fraudulent this is. Like, Rayquaza VMAX, we're talking Reshiram and we're talking Reshiram and Zekrom Tag Team GX levels of fraudulent, okay? Like,
oh, man.
Yeah, it's like that, dude. It's like 90th place, man. Yeah. It's like that.
I guess it kind of is. Yeah, it's just those are harsh words to throw around, so you can't do that lightly.
Yeah,
Reshiram and Zekrom, that's
tough. It is tough, but listen, the placements don't lie.
They don't. No, I'm with you. You just those words carry weight is all.
Yeah.
I think we do have to, before we talk about kind of what's ahead, it'd be silly not to mention Tord's disqualification in some capacity.
Oh yeah, of course.
So Tord was disqualified in day 2. If you want to see the story, I'd recommend just reading Tord's post on Twitter. As far as I can tell, it's a pretty accurate telling. Like his opponent from the actual round corroborated it. Basically, Tord had multiple judge visitations over the course of the tournament regarding pace of play. Something that we've actually talked about on the cast before directly is Tord's pace of play. I think this seems to have been a little mishandled though, from the way that it was portrayed. The Tord didn't really get like a interim chance to like appeal or a warning or anything along the way. He just went from like game loss DQ in the course of like 2 actions by the judge team. So I don't really know. I guess I wasn't there, but his opponent said that's basically what happened. And it seems a little odd to me that there wasn't like any communication along the way. That said, like, I don't wholly distrust the judging staff either. Like, I have to imagine there's something in there. Like, was it maybe like he should have been DQ'd in that exact moment? Maybe not. But was he potentially abusing the clock over the course of the tournament? Probably. Yeah, he's playing Gardevoir again, so.
Right. And I think like it's tough because you've got like the Pokemon TCG judging staff at large, right? And everybody knows about Tord. And Tord has been being watched for his pace of play and his gamesmanship of the clock for a long time. I'd say for at least a year, at least, right? This is not new. This is something that has been happening for a while. And it even kind of welled up in the big conversation about what we should do about 50-minute best of 3. We had a cast talking about, is 50-minute best of 3 dead in the Pokemon TCG? Do we need to change the rules, right? And it's like, and Tord is kind of, and we've talked about this, Tord is out there asking the question, what is the slowest legal pace of play? Not a lot of people want to go asking that question. In fact, that question, even just asking the question, can be conceived as cheating and against the spirit of the game. But the way that Pokemon's rules are set up, they encourage everybody who plays to ask, what is the slowest legal pace of play? I played Gardevoir. I felt it. I had to tell myself to forget that question exists and just basically play stupid, right? As to not be a poor sport. Right?
Yeah.
I did. Because the one round that I tied, I could have played slower in game 2. 100%. I won a 33-minute game 1. What does that tell me? All I got to do, if I play slow enough, game 2 ain't finishing.
Take a long enough turn 1, yeah.
Yep. But I didn't. I couldn't do that because that is cheating, right? It's like, but I know that. So it's like, so if I really wanted to find the line, I could have, but I'm like, I know that those are slippery slopes and you can't really do that. So it's like, I'm just going to have, and you know what? I took a tie that round, and that round led me to play against the guy that donked me. Right. And maybe that was my unraveling for the whole event, was that I didn't slam the brakes and slow play hard enough, right? You know, and it's like, and I didn't, right? I allowed my opponent the chance to play out the game and win, and sure enough, we tied. And then I got donked, and that, you know, and then everything, I ended up top 256. It's not, you know, it's tough. So when your rules ask you to ask, what's the slowest legal pace of play, then you are going to have your players basically gamesmanship. You're going to have them trying to gamify the clock. And Tord is just one of the most, serious cutthroat competitors in the Pokemon TCG and has no qualms with that. These are the rules. I am going to finesse them as hard as I can, right? I'm going to walk that line, right? I'm going to figure out what it is because I want to win. And in my mind, the rules need changed. That's in my mind. Because, like, I know for me personally, I'm not going to walk that line because it's just not what I'm going to do, right? Because I don't want to be Tord. I don't want to be the guy who gets made an example of, right? That is not for me, bro. This game is my career. I cannot afford to be made an example of. Absolutely not. This is not what I'm doing. So I'm not going to put myself out there like that. I am going to be a good sport, and I'm going to pretend I do not
I do not see it. Yeah.
Pretend I do not see it, right? And if we tie, we tie. Oh well, I won't play Guardy again. I learned my lesson. No more Guardy. Whatever. So, but for Tord, he's been walking that line for a long time now. It does kind of sound like, like I said, you got all of these judges, worldwide judges, right? And I think that there are some judges who have a very firm opinion that Tord is crossing lines and has been cheating and deserves to be disqualified, right? And then you've got some judges who maybe don't see it that way. And then, you kind of have this perfect storm of like, it almost seemed like it was a hit. Like, it's like, oh, we're getting him this time. Just, you got enough people together who don't agree with the way he plays. You got enough people together who are judges who don't agree with the way he plays, and it's happening, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my perspective as well. And I'll underlie all this. Please bear in mind around this conversation, a DQ is never not run by the head judge, right? Like, and that also means that there's no appeal to be had, right? Because the head judge has already made their call on the matter. Right. So the head judge did agree that a DQ was the penalty to take. Regardless, you can make, opinions about the head judge, but that was what happened here. My personal opinion is, in the exact moment he was DQ'd, Tord might not have been slow playing. This feels to me like almost like a retribution penalty. Yes. Like, how they do in real sports when they make a bad call and they give one back to the other team that's like a little 100%. On the fence. It feels like that to me, where Tord has been walking the line for a while and definitely crossed it on that stream game from a couple weeks back.
He has absolutely crossed it before, 100%. And so everybody's seen it, yes.
And so this was like the judge team's way of running that back, is what it feels like to me. Maybe I'm reading into that wrong, but that's like clearly what it seems to me.
Because it doesn't feel like he was necessarily like extraordinarily red-handed guilty at this event or in this situation, but he has been.
Yes, correct.
So it's just like, he has been like blatantly red-handed, just like kind of manipulating the clock brazenly, right? And it just seemed like you had enough judges who were fed up enough that they were just ready to, they were just like, nah, dude, we're gonna make an example out of you right here, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it. This is a retribution penalty of sorts for, prior infractions that were uncalled.
Yeah, and for that, it's almost like, dude, you play like that for long enough, you were gonna get smacked. This is why none of us wanted to do it. This is why I was like, I didn't even want to play Guardy, man, because it comes with that. And it is a problem with the rules, and the rules do need changed. And I agree with Tord, and I still think he's the best dang player in the game, and I still think that he's the best dang Gardevoir player in the game, and he's freaking brilliant. He's so good. But you gotta encourage players to play as smart as they can and not get punished for it, right? You need to make the rules in a way that they encourage the games in front of you to be finished. You need to make the rules in a way that they do not encourage players to ask what is the slowest pace of play, because they will ask themselves that question, and you do not want to be a judge trying to figure out what is the slowest legal pace of play. Nobody wants to figure that out.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. And in the spirit of assuming positive intent, like, I do think Tord is the best player in the game right now. And I think hopefully this is a wake up call for him, and that he'll just adjust his procedure going forward. I think he's a smart enough guy to recognize that situation and take action on it. So, I don't have any like ill wishes towards Tord. I do hope that he sort of cleans up that whole situation though. And like, I do agree. I agree. Like, he just recognized a flaw in the system and has been taking advantage of it. And hopefully this also inspires Pokemon to, if they're at the point where they're actually disqualifying their most noteworthy, most storied player in the world, then like something needs to change probably.
Right. It was the same thing with Jason Klaczynski in 2015, except they changed the rules like instantly after he did it, right? You have your 3-time world champion who just won, a national championship by abusing the clock, right? You either you strip him of his titles and disqualify him, or you change the freaking rules, right? just like don't do that. Like, all right, he found a flaw in your system, tighten it up.
Yeah, totally.
Just tighten it up. And we're at the same point now. Tord has been finding flaws in your system, tighten it up. Yeah,
it's sad that the flaws are in the same part of the system. It makes it feel like that's a really difficult problem to solve. So I don't envy being like the masterminds behind trying to solve that.
Oh, it's so easy to solve.
Best of one.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, fair, but you know, there's also going to be the community outrage that goes.
Of course, there's going to be outrage. It's not great, but it is the solution. Get over it. It's just it's the solution. That, or you're going to keep getting people get disqualified, and you're going to have this gray area, and you're going to have people abusing the clock. Yeah, and we've had whole episodes about it. But anyways, I digress.
Make every deck faster.
More
two-turn
ADP.
Two-turn
games. Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh.
Let's do it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I guess the one final statement I'll make, since you mentioned Yu-Gi-Oh, is people talk about how the time is not a problem in other games, but other games do not search their deck as much as Pokemon. Other games do not shuffle as much as Pokemon. Like, it's just not the same. So,
it's not. Even a deck that can win in 4 turns like Mew VMAX, it doesn't matter. 4 turns.
So much shuffling.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So let's wrap up then by looking at what's ahead. So Juho and Noah making the finals with Miraidon and Entei Valiant. Entei Valiant and Miraidon winning both other divisions at LAIC. Big Basics, the kind of the top dogs to beat at this point in the metagame. San Antonio is just a couple weeks away. Andrew, what are you thinking is the go forward in the Paradox Rift metagame?
I feel like it's time for Mew to make its triumphant return.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's feeling real Mew-like right now. I'm thinking Mew's perfect time. It got 9th place at LAIC. Not too hot, but right there.
Yeah.
Right freaking there. And is just poised and ready to strike. I could see Mew really making a very big resurgence, especially with your big basic decks like Miraidon. You know who does not give 2 squats about Iron Valiant or Iron Hands is Mew VMAX.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm
on
Roaring
the same
Moon
page.
being fraudulent. Roaring Moon is fraudulent. You only got to worry about Charizard. No problem. Here comes Mew, baby.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the meta will resurge on Mew for sure, or at least top placements will resurge on Mew. I also think it's just harder and harder to like really afford the space to tech for Mew. There's just so much going on in the metagame now and there's so many good decks. Like, are you really going to slot in that Spiritomb? Are you really going to slot that Drapion? Maybe, but you have to really be thoughtful about that choice in a way that you didn't have to be, 6 months ago when you're talking about Mew. So I think Mew's a really prime spot right now. We do have a European regional coming up this weekend, which is Mew's favorite time of year. So
we'll probably see it happen right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you the same thing I told Jesse in the group chat, and that's I think Mew is going to collect the Europe tax this weekend.
I agree. If I were playing at either Brisbane or the European regional, I would have Mew sleeved up and ready to roll. Yep, this weekend. Yeah. Yes, 100%. Ain't nobody playing Spiritomb, bro. Ain't nobody playing no Drapions. Just roll in and collect your fat dub.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the other potential deck that could thrive is I think Charizard because it's strong into Mew, and I think Charizard can hold its own against Miraidon even with Iron Hands, because Charizard can pretty much instantly respond to the Iron Hands, whereas Gardevoir cannot. So I think Charizard is actually an okay call as well going into the weekend, but Mew is totally like the deck that I vibe with right now. It's just so good into both of the finalists. Like, if you look at their metagame stats, they suck so hard against Mew, both of them. So
they do.
I think the only other deck that I would really consider besides Mew would be something similar to like Gabriel Fernandez or Juho's Miraidon list, but like throw in a Beach Cord Drapion instead of the Paths. And like try and get ahead of the Mew while still playing a big basic deck. I think either of those options are really well poised heading into LAIC.
I agree.
Or sorry, not LAIC, post LAIC.
Post LAIC, yes. And both of us are going to be attending San Antonio. So very much looking forward to that. We are the half of the team that needs to post some results, Riley. So it is time. Yeah. It is time.
Well, I've made day
it's
2.
Our time.
So.
You made day 2. Well,
So at least one of us has done anything.
I won a league challenge last night at Full Grip Games.
That's fair. I went to one league challenge and dropped out in round 2. So that's
also, how many points did your day 2 finish get you?
Not nearly as many as yours, buddy.
That's my top 256 LAIC. No, it didn't. My 80 championship points. Thank you. That's as much as a top 16 regional.
It's fine, man. It's fine. When I do better than you at the European International Championship, we'll see who's laughing.
We will. Scoreboard last year, EUIC top 64, baby. Let's go.
Okay.
64.
I was talking about this with JW. I forget it was on the cast or off, but I've definitely had the most reliable post-pandemic results out of anybody in our group by a mile. So I'm not hearing it. Okay.
You have. But I'll put myself as second place there. That's fine.
You're second most reliable. JW is the best spike finishes by far.
Yeah.
But
Jesse is the second best spike finishes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but I know. Me and you are all reliable. I know. And now we got these guys over here who were just filled with top 128s. And now they're talking their smack. It's like, bro, we were carrying the torch the whole freaking time.
I know. JW's insufferable, but
oh, of course he is, bro. I just remind him that for like 2 years he didn't top 32 a single event. All right, just keep
Scoreboard. Yeah.
Scoreboard, bro.
Yeah, that's fair.
Listen, I didn't have to.
Buddy.
Listen, you go into hibernation for 2 years. I guess you can pop off. Go ahead.
Facts. So to wrap off for today, I would love to just share, since we're recording on Thanksgiving, what is something that you're thankful about with your experience in the Pokemon trading card game, Andrew? Could be recent history, could be more generic, but what is something that you are thankful for?
Oh, I am so thankful for the community of players, not just here at Full Grip Games, though I would like to give a special shout out to the Full Grip Games local community. I have had the most wonderful experiences playing in our local Gym Leader Challenge tournaments, making friends with the new post-pandemic locals that we've had here at Full Grip. It's been a wonderful community, but also the community of players that I met in Brazil at LAIC. Just a fantastic group of people. So warm and welcoming and encouraging. It has been a real blessing, and I'm very thankful for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I think of Pokemon, what I always tell people about when they ask about Pokemon in sort of my day-to-day life is I am so thankful that Pokemon is a way for me to enjoy the world with a community of awesome people who I've built some of my strongest friendships of my entire life with, and get an excuse to travel to London or Sao Paulo or Japan with the people who matter most, and then also sling some cards. Like, can't beat it. So shout out to the entire Pokemon community for making this such a special game. It's a really cool group of folks that partake in this hobby, and I'm also thankful for all the listeners of Tag Team who make this cast possible. We're ever appreciative for all your support.
100%. And with that, that'll do it for the cast today. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find us on the X app at...
No, you're saying it too now.
You have to, bro. I know. I hate it. Listen, I hate the future, but it is what it is, man. Yeah. The X gonna give it to you, bro. Smiles with Riles and at EnjoyFriend and at Tag Team Podcast. You can listen to Tag Team Podcast wherever you can find podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, and then also on Tricky Jim YouTube channel.
Thank you so much again for listening and your ongoing support over the years. We hope you have an awesome Thanksgiving if you're living in the States and celebrate. We hope you have an awesome rest of your week regardless if you don't. And we will catch you all next time. Peace.
See ya.